This e-lecture is part of Pearson's professional development series for first-year writing instructors.
Hi, my name is Laura Gurak. I'm at the University of Minnesota, and I thought it would be fun to talk about what is writing in a digital age. So we know that people are writing more than they've ever written before in some ways, even though there was a lot of talk at the beginning of the computing age about the paperless society. Actually, this digital age generates a lot more writing than anyone might have been able to predict. Reports, memos, white papers, all these traditional forms, there's actually more of them in some ways because they can be distributed online. So the importance of all kinds of writing is just made that much more apparent in the digital age. Now, email is the most common application, and it generates, it's easy to say, millions of messages daily. So if you think about all the writing that takes place with email on a daily basis, it's probably one of the most prolific times for writing ever, really. Now add to that instant messaging, text messaging, writing with your phone, blogs, wikis, and now all the social networking sites where people are constantly writing about their identity and what they're doing every day. So it's pretty fair to say that people are writing more than ever before. Let's talk for a minute about the forms and genres of the writing too. So people are writing more than ever before. The tools are incredibly powerful. And also the forms and genres are kind of interesting because they're blending old forms with some of these new forms. So we're getting a lot of these kind of hybrid forms of writing, which are interesting and a little bit difficult to teach, I think, because not all of us who are teaching are as familiar with these forms often as our students are. So take email, for example. Email is actually based on the memo. It looks like a memo, it's shaped like a memo, it has to, from, subject, date, fields, and yet we really don't use it like a memo. We use it in all kinds of ways. Sometimes we use it like a memo to document something, other times we're using it more like a letter. Take the good old-fashioned report. I mean, traditionally reports were taught as something that we teach people how to write a nice report on paper. Usually it's bound. But a lot more reports these days are web-based. And then we get into the world of instant or text messaging, which is really, a lot of people have argued, is a hybrid of speech and writing. So that presents a really interesting blend of what we used to call, of two disciplines that have kept themselves really separate in some ways, which is the spoken word and the written word. We see a blur of that with instant messaging. So based on these features, what are the elements that are important for teaching writing? I'd like to talk about 5 things. The first is this notion of writing by code. So when I said that people were writing more than ever before and that the tools are very powerful and that the forms are blurred, actually people are using templates and other coded tools to make a lot of these choices. They're built into word processing, they're built into presentation software like PowerPoint. If you use a blog or use a social networking site, they're all driven by templates. So often people are writing in these genres without giving the kind of consideration we used to think was so important in teaching writing: audience, purpose, then select the genre. People are actually using templates a lot more to shape what they write. I think if you were to assign a group of students today to write a memo, you'd find that 90% of them or more would just use the memo template from Microsoft Word. That's one of these 5 features. In a minute I'll talk about kind of what I think are some appropriate ways to cope with that. Okay, so the second feature that's important to consider when teaching writing in a digital age is this combination notion of speed and reach. Digital texts travel widely with very little control over who reads them. So our traditional sense of audience, or how we would teach about audience, which is carefully consider your audience before you craft your document. This is hard to do in an age where you have very little control over who's actually going to see the content of what you're writing. In a digital world, texts travel widely with very little control over who reads them. And so the way we teach audience is complicated. It's going to be more complicated than it was in the past. The third item to think about is collaboration. An idea that people have thought about in the teaching of writing for many years. But it gets complicated in a digital age because sometimes what students think of as collaboration is what their instructors might have called plagiarism for a long time. The internet was built on the idea that you can take things, that you can cut and paste, that you can move things around. And so this whole idea of teaching students collaboration, but teaching it in the digital context is another item that is important in teaching writing in a digital age. The fourth item is the notion of tone and style, that what's appropriate in an instant message or in a friendly email to your friend or a chatty little text message on your phone is not appropriate for a business letter. And this may seem intuitively obvious, but it doesn't come through all the time. And I think we're seeing more of this kind of chatty, friendly tone creep into student writing. The fifth item to think about that makes teaching writing in a digital age both interesting and challenging is the notion of invention and delivery, sort of two rhetorical concepts that have traditionally been thought of separately. First, you invent your ideas, and then you figure out how you're going to deliver them or design them. These things happen at the same time in digital writing. And I think if you loop back to my first feature, Writing by Code, that's part of the reason, is while you're writing and coming up with your ideas, the software is shaping the way the thing looks. It's very rare to make a PowerPoint presentation in a plain vanilla way and then add all the bells and whistles. People are doing both as they go along. People are writing more than ever before, and the tools are very powerful, and the forms and genres are both old and new, but mainly they're starting to blur. And there are kind of these 5 features that are important to think about, that are kind of confusing things in some ways when we think about teaching writing. So what do we do about this? Where do we go, and how do we offer students the best guidance we can? I think anybody teaching undergraduates knows that students are intuitively smart with technology. They want to get started quickly, and they're really great imitators because they're surrounded with all these forms of writing, and the tools make it really easy for them. So my first suggestion is to sort of not hold students back and make them go through lots of theoretical discussions and all kinds of applications that they think are irrelevant in some ways, but to really let them get started first, let them give it a try and see what they're doing, watch the way they use the technology and use that as a way to offer suggestions and advice. I would say there are probably a couple of key points where I think students really still do need guidance, despite the fact that they're digital natives and really smart with these tools. Style and tone, which I mentioned a moment ago, is a really important area. Students are still not that swift about knowing when the informal tone is not appropriate for business writing or technical writing or writing in academic settings. Just some really basic writing skills, just really basic things like cohesion, coherence, logic, how to get ideas to flow properly, how to chunk information into paragraphs properly and use headings. We don't think about that too much when we spend most of our day sending texts and writing email. So just genre selection, I mean, students seem to default to the easiest genre, the one they use the most. Some students have told stories about using text messaging to break up with their boyfriend or girlfriend, and that's an obvious place where the genre is not right for the situation. Just giving students more guidance about when it's appropriate to go on a job interview. You're going to send a thank you letter. It's probably better to use an actual business letter or card or something than it is to do that by email. And then to just do everything you can to continue to help students take a critical view of technology, including examining what some of these templates actually do, that maybe a template-driven way of choosing how and what you're going to write is not always appropriate. So that's sort of a summary of what writing is in a digital age and the kind of challenges we're facing. And despite the challenges, it's a really exciting time to be teaching writing of any form because students are already quite engaged with writing. They're interested, they want to learn. And I think the key is to help them discover and learn the more subtle concepts of writing in the context of the world they already inhabit, where they're doing a lot of writing every day. Engage the students in the technologies they know and use that to draw them out and bring them back to the concepts that you want to have them work with in the classroom and while they're students at the university.
For additional e-lectures, visit Pearson's professional development site for first-year writing instructors at www.pearsonhighered.com/compro.